This is the story of a woman who conquered everything she was told she could never have, and is now watching it slowly slip away. Queen Camilla stands today at the absolute peak of her 5-decade climb. She has the title, the crown, the military honors, constitutional legitimacy, the palace, and yet the woman commanding the salute of Britain's most elite soldiers is doing so on borrowed time, in a monarchy that is already quietly pivoting away from her. That is the central contradiction of Camilla's position in 2026. And once you understand it, you can't unsee it. Let's talk about what actually happened on June 9th, 2026, and why it matters so much more than the official story suggests. The ceremony that was supposed to say everything on that day, Queen Camilla stood in front of the Grenadier Guards at Buckingham Palace. She was dressed in a stunning tailored regimental outfit. She wore the historic Grenadier Guards brooch, the very one that once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II herself. She watched infantrymen bow their heads before the drum altar while the chaplain general consecrated the new colors. On paper, this was the ultimate arrival. Camilla is the colonel of the regiment, the most senior foot regiment of the entire household division. This is the same role that Queen Elizabeth stripped from Prince Andrew back in 2022. So when Camilla steps into that position, she isn't just accepting a military honor. She is stepping into a space once occupied by one of Britain's most revered monarchs. She is stepping over the ruins of a fallen prince to get there. This should have felt like pure triumph. 50 years of struggle, vilification, and grinding institutional persistence. All of it culminating in this single visual moment. The woman who was once labeled the most hated person in British tabloids, the shadowy outsider lurking at the edge of Windsor family photographs, is now receiving the formal salute of Britain's finest soldiers. But here is what I want you to sit with for a moment. Because the more carefully you look at what this ceremony actually represents, as opposed to what it is designed to project, the more it starts to resemble something other than triumph. It starts to look like a very formal, very expensive, very carefully choreographed act of anchoring. And anchoring is what you do when you're afraid of drifting away. To understand why Camilla's position is so precarious despite looking so formidable, you need to understand how power actually works in the British monarchy. There are two completely separate currencies. The first is constitutional legitimacy. This is the formal stuff. The titles, the roles, the military appointments, the legal standing. Camilla has this in abundance. King Charles has made absolutely sure of that. He has granted her everything within his power to grant. The late Queen's Platinum Jubilee announcement paved the way. The coronation in 2023 sealed it. And now, the Grenadier Guards ceremony adds another layer of institutional armor. The second currency is public adoration. And this is where Camilla's position becomes genuinely fragile. Here is the honest truth about where the British public stands on Camilla. They have accepted her. They have tolerated her. They have intellectually processed the fact that she is the queen now, and they have made their peace with it. But they have never emotionally embraced her. Not the way they embraced Diana. Not the way they embraced Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Today, the public's acceptance of Camilla is cold. It is transactional. It is born largely from respect for King Charles, not from genuine personal warmth toward her. And that distinction carries enormous consequence, because without that second currency, without the reservoir of public goodwill, Camilla has zero political cushion. She cannot afford a misstep. She cannot afford a public relations stumble. She cannot afford even the appearance of weakness because there is no well of public affection to draw from when things get difficult. Her power is a carefully managed structure. Everyone involved in maintaining it knows exactly how fragile that structure is. Now, if that was the whole picture, it would already be precarious enough. But the thing that truly makes Camilla's position so tense, the thing that must haunt her behind closed doors, is what I would call the generational math. Camilla ascended to the throne in her mid-70s alongside a king who was also in his mid-70s. This was never going to be an expansive era-defining reign on the scale of Queen Elizabeth's 7 decades. It was always going to be a bridge, a transitional chapter, a necessary passage between two larger eras. And Camilla knows, as does everyone in that palace, that her entire position is tied to the heartbeat of one man. The moment that bond is severed by mortality, her institutional armor does not gradually fade. It does not transition respectfully over a period of adjustment. It vanishes instantly. She goes from reigning queen to dowager queen, which is a title that strips away her active constitutional role, her command over prestigious military regiments like the Grenadier Guards, and her central position on the global stage. Everything she stood there accepting the salute for in June 2026, gone. I think this is the part that people do not fully appreciate when they see these ceremonial photographs. Every single one of them is shadowed by a knowledge that this is temporary in a way that Elizabeth's reign never was. Elizabeth had decades to weave herself into the very fabric of global consciousness. Camilla has a compressed window, and she knows it. Every minor health concern about Charles, every visible sign of fatigue, every rumor about the king slowing down, each one of those signals a potential sudden end to what she has spent 50 years working toward. That is not paranoia. That is just an accurate reading of how the institution works. But honestly, the biological clock is only one of the clocks running against her, because there is another one, the popularity clock, the generational shift that is happening whether Camilla wants it to or not. And this is where things get genuinely complicated. William and Catherine represent what I would describe as an existential challenge to everything Camilla has spent decades securing. And I want to be very clear about how I mean that, because I am not suggesting conspiracy or deliberate sabotage. The threat isn't that William and Catherine are doing anything to undermine her. The threat is that they don't have to do anything at all. Their mere existence, their effortless star power, their organic and authentic connection with the public, all of it naturally pulls attention and relevance away from the current queen. Simply by being present, they are the story. The contrast between Camilla and Catherine specifically is quite stark when you lay it out honestly. Camilla's journey to the throne was a grueling defensive campaign that took decades of careful navigation just to achieve basic public tolerance. She had to survive being labeled the most hated woman in Britain. She had to endure the explicit compromise that she would only ever be known as Princess Consort, a title specifically designed to soothe a grieving and resentful public. Then she had to spend years methodically dismantling that compromise through quiet persistence, institutional alignment, and unyielding devotion to duty. She earned her place through sheer endurance. That is genuinely how she got here. Catherine entered the royal family already beloved. She has spent her years cultivating an image of what people describe as flawless modern grace that commands global adoration. When Catherine steps into the public eye, she does not need ancient military titles or elaborate state rituals to assert her legitimacy. Her power is intrinsic. It is generated by a genuine emotional bond with the public. So when both women appear at events, the international media narrative naturally gravitates toward the Princess of Wales. Camilla finds herself in a secondary position on her own stage. Not because of unfairness, not because of a coordinated effort to sideline her, simply because Catherine is more compelling to the public, and Camilla is smart enough to understand exactly what that means. What I think Camilla experiences, and what I believe drives much of the intensity surrounding her public appearances, is what I would call an anxiety of erasure. She is hyper-aware that the moment Catherine returns completely to the global spotlight, which she has been doing steadily, the media narrative instantly recalibrates. The achievements of the king and queen get quietly reduced to background noise whenever the Prince and Princess of Wales step forward. Camilla's concern isn't that Catherine will actively work to diminish her legacy. It is something subtler and, in some ways, more difficult to defend against. It is the possibility that Catherine's presence will render Camilla's hard-fought achievements irrelevant almost by accident. That she will be remembered as a mere historical footnote between two iconic eras, the era of Diana and the era of Catherine, the transitional figure who held the space between two genuinely beloved women. And honestly, that is probably exactly what is going to happen. Not through anyone's malice, but through the simple arithmetic of public feeling. What makes this even more layered is that William is not simply waiting passively in the wings. He is a forward-thinking prince with clear ideas about how a modern, streamlined monarchy should look. And Camilla has to be aware that William's vision for the future of the House of Windsor may not include a significant place for her or for the Parker Bowles branch of her family. Charles has done everything within his power to elevate his wife and weave her family into the periphery of royal life. But William's ascension will bring a completely different set of priorities. The moment William becomes king, which could happen at any time, given King Charles's age and health, the institutional protection Camilla currently enjoys dissolves. The power dynamic shifts entirely into the hands of a man who carries the living memory of his mother, Princess Diana. I am not suggesting William is nursing a grudge or engineering a revenge scenario. I do not think that is how he operates. But his vision for the monarchy will naturally center his wife and his children, not his father's wife and her family. That is not cruelty. That is simply how succession works. But for a woman who spent 50 years fighting to get inside the inner circle, the knowledge that her position will be systematically downgraded the moment her husband is no longer king, that must be a constant and underlying dread. Every ceremony she presides over is a temporary luxury she knows will end. And then, there is the layer beyond even William and Catherine. This is the part I think receives far too little attention. The younger generation, the untainted branches of the royal family tree. Consider a figure like James Alexander, the Earl of Wessex, formerly known as Viscount Severn, the youngest grandson of Queen Elizabeth and the son of Prince Edward and Sophie. James represents something that Camilla simply cannot compete with: a completely clean slate, a pristine, unblemished reputation. He was raised deliberately outside the toxic media spotlight by parents who prioritized a grounded, scandal-free upbringing. He enters the royal stage with zero historical baggage. The contrast is impossible to ignore. It highlights the fundamental limitation of Camilla's authority in this new era. She can command the salute of the Grenadier Guards today. She can occupy the ceremonial space of a monarchical figure. She cannot pass any of that standing to her own biological children from the Parker Bowles line. The future belongs to the direct bloodline descendants, William and Catherine's children, James Alexander, and the rest of the younger generation. Carry the Windsor heritage without any of the complicated historical associations that define Camilla's biography. As the public and the media look toward what a modernized monarchy should look like, the appetite for fresh, scandal-free faces grows naturally. Every wave of praise directed at these younger royals serves as a quiet reminder to Camilla that she is a custodian of the past, while they are the inheritors of the future. And that is the paradox that defines her entire queenship. She has achieved everything she was told she could never have. She conquered an institution that once sought to exclude her. She broke through a wall of public hostility that would have crushed most people. She secured the highest title available to a royal consort. She stands before the Grenadier Guards in tailored elegance, wearing Queen Elizabeth's own brooch, accepting the formal salutes of the realm. By every measurable standard, this should be the ultimate vindication, and in a sense, it genuinely is. But vindication is not the same thing as security. The very system she fought so hard to enter is designed to outlive her. The very generation waiting in the wings is positioned to reshape the institution's focus the moment she steps off the stage. The throne she spent a lifetime working to share is not a permanent sanctuary. It is a temporary, highly scrutinized position, and the shadows cast by William, Catherine, and the rising generation are growing longer by the day. I think this is why so many people find themselves unable to look away from Camilla even when they want to. Her story embodies themes that feel timeless: the pursuit of power, the price of survival, the absolute fragility of status. Underneath the carefully curated exterior of a confident queen lies a woman running a quiet, relentless race against biological time and generational change. Her power is not self-sustaining. It is a borrowed asset entirely dependent on the lifetime of King Charles. She operates with the acute awareness that she is the custodian of a transitional era, a brief bridge between the monumental legacy of Elizabeth and the inevitable dominance of William and Catherine's chapter. The moment that bridge reaches its natural end, the protective architecture of the state will recalibrate around the new king. The courtiers and politicians who currently bow to her authority do so out of respect for the reigning monarch, not out of personal loyalty to her as an individual. Without Charles, her institutional shield does not just weaken, it crumbles, leaving her exposed to a world that has never fully forgotten the turbulent history of how she came to be here. So, what do we make of the Grenadier Guard ceremony of June 9th, 2026? The official reading is that it represents Camilla at the zenith of her power, and that is not wrong. In terms of formal institutional recognition, this moment is as high as she can go. The colonel of the most senior foot regiment of the household division, wearing the Queen's own brooch, presiding over one of the most ancient and prestigious military traditions in the world. But when you understand the invisible pressures pressing in from all sides, the ceremony starts to look like something else. Starts to look less like a declaration of permanence and more like a calculated act of anchoring, a deliberate effort to embed herself so deeply into the visible fabric of the state that she cannot be easily erased when the transition comes. It is a strategy, a conscious effort to accumulate visible, formal victories in the present because the future is genuinely uncertain. Collect enough ceremonial weight, the thinking goes, and perhaps the historical record will treat you as more than a footnote. But that strategy is inherently exhausting. It requires absolute flawlessness from a woman approaching her 80s, operating under the relentless attention of a global media environment that is always alert to any sign of weakness or decline. Every public appearance has to be executed without a single visible stumble, because there is no reservoir of public affection to cushion a fall. The acceptance she has earned is intellectual, not emotional. It is conditional, not unconditional. And conditional acceptance can always be reconsidered. That is the brutal mechanics of power in the modern monarchy. Public affection is the ultimate shield against political irrelevance. And because Camilla possesses only the formal mechanisms of power, without the deep emotional devotion of the people, she remains highly vulnerable to the shifting winds of royal popularity. The ultimate complexity of Camilla's position, and the reason her story holds such a grip on the public imagination, is the inescapable truth embedded in her own history. For decades, she endured unprecedented public scorn to be with a man she loved. She gradually engineered an institutional ascent that culminated in the crown. It is, by any fair assessment, one of the most remarkable survival stories in modern royal history. The sheer persistence required to transform from Britain's most vilified figure into its reigning queen is genuinely extraordinary. Yet as she stands before the Grenadier Guards in 2026, basking in the formal salutes of the state, she faces what may be her most sobering realization yet. The system she conquered is designed to outlive her. The generation waiting in the wings is positioned to reshape the institution's priorities the moment she steps off the stage. Her current supremacy is a historical anomaly, a brief interlude in the Windsor narrative. Once the crown passes from Charles, the court will rapidly recalibrate around the new king and the untainted generation. William's vision will take precedence. Catherine's connection with the public will dominate. The younger royals with their clean slates and direct bloodlines will assume their natural positions. And Camilla will face the reality that her decades of survival and struggle were ultimately spent securing a temporary peak from which she must inevitably descend. The Grenadier Guard ceremony of June 2026 will likely be remembered as the defining visual representation of her reign, a moment of supreme institutional validation, shadowed by an inescapable undercurrent of personal and political vulnerability. The formal salutes of Britain's most elite soldiers provided the highest possible level of official recognition, but as the final notes of the military brass faded across the grounds of Buckingham Palace, that grand spectacle could not erase the profound anxieties that define her daily reality. She is a queen ruling on borrowed time, operating within a transitional monarchy, facing a looming generational eclipse that she cannot stop. The question was never whether she is powerful today. She is. The question, the one that haunts every ceremonial appearance, every carefully chosen outfit, every precisely executed public moment, is how she navigates the knowledge that the clock is running, and that when it stops, the world will be looking somewhere else entirely. That is the story beneath the story of Camilla's reign, and it is the one worth understanding.